story kicks off right in the middle of chaos as Brian Godlock desperately sprints through city streets, chasing the sound of rapid gunfire. He stumbles upon a lethal turf war between two rival syndicates. When one gang wipes out the other, the survivors pivot their vehicle directly toward Brian. Operating purely on instinct, Brian grabs a metal pipe and smashes their windshield. The strategy backfires instantly. Forced to flee from the Brian uses a nearby forklift as an improvised weapon, resulting in a fatal collision for one attacker. However, the gang's ruthless leader, a heavily tattooed enforcer named Playa, shoots Brian point-blank through the throat, leaving him to bleed out on the pavement. Emergency services rush Brian to the hospital, where his grieving wife, Saya, waits anxiously. Doctors manage to stabilize him, but the damage is permanent. The bullet destroyed his vocal cords, leaving him completely mute. Returning home months later, the silence in the house is deafening. Brian is haunted by memories of his young son, Taylor, who was caught in the crossfire of that same drive-by shooting right in their front yard. Overwhelmed by grief, Brian spirals into isolation and alcoholism. When reading news coverage of his son's unsolved murder, something snaps inside him. Looking at the calendar, he selects December 24th, 1 year from the tragedy, as his deadline for total vengeance. Brian shifts his focus entirely toward physical and tactical preparation. Over the next several months, he undergoes a total transformation. He converts his garage into a gym, practices hand-to-hand combat, and trains rigorously at the firing range until his marksmanship is flawless. Next, he acquires and retrofits a reinforced muscle car built for high-speed pursuit. Finally, he monitors police scanners and begins physically staking out Playa's operations, taking detailed surveillance photos of the entire syndicate network. Characters, approximately 1,975. This relentless obsession places an unbearable strain on his marriage. Unable to reach her husband emotionally, Saya packs her belongings and moves out, leaving Brian entirely alone with his mission. By late December, the preparation phase ends. Brian ambushes a mid-level gang member and forcibly interrogates him inside his workshop to map out the syndicate's chain of command. Once he has the necessary information, Brian binds the operative and leaves him outside the precinct of Detective Vassell, the lead officer on Taylor's cold case. Along with the informant, Brian leaves behind a flash drive containing his entire intelligence file on Playa's network. On Christmas Eve, Brian visits Taylor's grave one last time, leaving behind a small toy train as a birthday gift for his late son. Knowing he might not survive the night, he also leaves a farewell letter for Saya. Returning to the streets, Brian officially engages the syndicate. He intercepts two gang members during a street robbery, neutralizing them and delivering a grim warning to Playa by shipping the dead operatives' severed fingers directly to gang headquarters. When a street ambush erupts between the gang and local law enforcement, Brian drives his armored car directly into the firefight. He attempts to rescue an injured officer, but she succumbs to her wounds. Spotting a gangster live-streaming the ambush to Playa, Brian neutralizes him on camera, broadcasting a direct message to the syndicate leader. Playa immediately issues an all-points directive to his entire organization: hunt down the vigilante at all costs. A massive vehicular chase breaks out across the city as Playa's lieutenants swarm Brian's position. Surrounded by armed SUV units and a high-speed motorcycle attacker, Brian executes precise tactical maneuvers. He uses a handbrake drift to fire directly through a pursuing vehicle's windshield. Trapped in a bottleneck between two heavy vehicles, he performs a pit maneuver, forcing both enemy trucks into a catastrophic pileup. When the motorcyclist attempts to board his moving car, Brian disarms the rider mid-transit and steers the vehicle into a concrete barrier to stop the assault. Badly bruised and driving a completely battered vehicle, Brian prepares for the final assault. Meanwhile, Detective Vassell reviews the flash drive evidence at the precinct and realizes Brian's true objective, immediately calling for backup and heading toward Playa's fortified compound. Using a stolen gang communications radio, Brian learns that Playa has recalled all remaining foot soldiers to defend the main stronghold. Brian breaches the outer gates of the motorcycle, detonating the bike with a massive fireball that destroys the entry guard post. Brian pushes floor by floor up the complex. Relying on close-quarters combat and close-range shotgun blasts, he clears multiple waves of heavily armed guards. On the upper floors, Brian is ambushed by Ruiz, Playa's primary enforcer. After a brutal bare-knuckle brawl that leaves both men heavily injured, Brian manages to outmaneuver and eliminate Ruiz. Detective Vassell breaches the building shortly after, following the trail of destruction. Moving through the upper level, Vassell encounters Brian. Recognizing that they share the same goal, The detective lowers his weapon to form an uneasy alliance. Before they can reach the inner office, Playa's partner opens heavy suppressive fire, wounding both Vassal and Brian. Brian draws her fire, allowing him to close the distance and eliminate the threat, though he sustains additional injuries in the process. With no guards left, Brian stumbles into the main office for a final showdown with Playa. Despite taking multiple chest hits to his body armor, Brian tackles Playa to the ground. In a desperate struggle, Brian chokes the syndicate boss to death, finally ending the man responsible for his family's tragedy. As life leaves Playa, Brian collapses next to Detective Vassal, experiencing a final, peaceful vision of his son. Later, Saya visits Taylor's grave, where Brian's toy train circles the headstone. She finds the letter left behind by her husband, finally finding closure amidst the heartbreak. And that's how the movie ends. What do you think about Brian? Let us know in the comments section, and don't forget to like and subscribe.